If you don't have an engaged workforce, then conversely, there is a huge leakage, and the U.S. Industry. I think we shared the example of the U.S. industry, but I'm sure this is true of other countries and other industries also, that they are losing billions of dollars. So the loss in the U.S. Industry is pegged at about anywhere between 240 to 300 billion dollar annually, due to lack of employee engagement. And then we saw what are the levers to ensure employee engagement, how we can make sure that people are better engaged, people are making what we described as the discretionary effort. That is very critical. Are they making that discretionary effort which they are capable of, but may not be making if they are not adequately engaged? So when they are adequately engaged, they take go that extra mile, they take that extra step, and ensure that the discretionary effort that every employee is capable of is getting exercised. So that's a very critical concept in talent management, and so we need to be concerned about why it's important, what is, if it is not there, what are the consequences, and what we can do to ensure employee engagement. So today we will start with an important tool in talent management. This it's a tool, and that's why I'm kind of calling it a tool. It's simply, and a tool is only as good as how you use it. So if you use it well, if you people, all the stakeholders are serious about the tool, then great, you have something which is going to help you. But if it is not taken with the degree of seriousness that it should be taken, then the tool may not be very effective. So the tool that we are talking about is skill matrix. In certain contexts, it's better known as a competency matrix. I prefer to call it a competency matrix. So that's what we will talk about, and then we will go on to succession planning. So let me share my screen with you. So any thoughts on how would you define a skill matrix? Popularly, it's known as a skill matrix. So how would you define a skill matrix? Anyone?
So skill metrics would, I don't know, I'm correct or not, would be primarily as per their KPIs, whatever, what is expected out of them, and accordingly, what all competencies are required. So for a different job role, there should be a different skill metrics, or depending on the departments. So for a sales professional, the metrics would be altogether very different. If you talk about the accounts people, it will be different. For the HR, they will be absolutely different.
Yes. So yes, it is going to be different for different departments and different work profiles. So let me come. Skill matrix or a competency matrix is a tool to map required and desired skills for a team or a project. So basically, let's say I am getting into a project of, I'm going to be constructing a blast furnace. So I will go and say that what are the skills that are required to create a blast furnace. I would need mapping skills, I would need civil engineering skills, I would need scaffolding, I would need bricklaying, I would need planning, I would need costing. So I would need X number of skills to get into this project. Now, basically, what it entails, it is basically a grid. So you have a x-axis and a y-axis, you have a grid, and it visualizes the required skills, that this is what is required. And then it also plots what is available. So let's say I require, bricklaying skills, which is to the level of expertise. But currently I have people who are bricklayers, but who may not be experts, but probably they are competent. So I will say that these are the skills that are required, but currently I have this level of this particular skill. So basically, it talks about a skill and also the levels in that skill. Okay. So skills and competencies in a team. So this makes it an essential tool for any data-driven HR professional. Now, this is important. Unfortunately, this is not really used in too many organizations. And even if they have the infrastructure to use it, people don't typically use it. But it gets used to an extent in the software environment. And wherever you have a fair degree of technicality in terms of engineering, software, and specialized tasks. So there you tend to find a skill matrix. So this is what it looks like to an extent. So you have different capabilities on the x-axis. You have business acumen, data analytics, advanced data analytics, data visualization, etc. And then on the y-axis you have the names of the individuals that there is Jonathan, Alden, Tracy, Sandra. And over here, apart from, so generally, if you see my cursor, it generally the skill matrix talks about proficiency. But skill matrix, there can be higher levels of detail in a skill matrix. So they may even get into levels of interest. So let's say Jonathan is has a very good business acumen, and his proficiency level is 3. So you can see the scale given below. 3 is advanced. Okay, so he is at an advanced level of proficiency. Then you have interest is a binary. Instead of giving a scale of interest, it is simply either he's interested or he's not interested. So not interested is 0 and interested is 1. So here we see that Jonathan, the business acumen is level 3, which means that he is at the highest level of proficiency, and his interest level is 1, which means that he's interested. Now, same goes for, let's say, Alden. He's at a proficiency level of 3 and an interest level of 1. Now, if we look at Tracy, we will see that her business acumen is at a beginner stage. It's at a basic level. And her interest level, however, is good. So let's say you have a project where you already have 3 people who are good at business acumen, and you are looking for a fourth person who doesn't really have to be very good currently, but her interest level should be high. So here you can see that okay, Tracy is a good candidate for that. Her interest level is high, and her proficiency can be developed. It is at a beginner stage, it is at a basic stage, but it can be developed further, considering that you have 2 other people who are already proficient and experts. Then you have, let's say, Sandra, who's at level 2 and interest level 1. And same goes for the all the other skills that are listed over here. So let's say Alden is in terms of data analytics. Alden is at level 1 and interest level is 0. So now if somebody's interest level is 0, what are the observations you may have about this person? Any thoughts?
So they may not want to do anything in data analytics, or interest is not there. Um, it's no point then, unless the role demands it. For further skill development, maybe we can just push it behind and look at areas of interest.
Right. So both from the individual's perspective, the team's perspective, and the organization's perspective. Now, suppose I'm starting a project where I need at least one HR guy who's supposed to be a specialist in data analytics. Now, obviously, when I look at the skill matrix, it's going to help me decide whom to select. And here, if I look at data analytics, the only person who has interest in it and who's at a basic stage, who's at a better than basic stage, is Tracy. So basically, if you can see, in terms of talent management, what this tool does is that it throws up the most likely candidate that the who's likely to fill that position which you have open for, let's say, data analytics. So the skill matrix, you can see how easy it is once you have this kind of a matrix in front of you, that you are looking for a particular profile. Your currently there is a gap in your skill set. For this particular team, you need somebody who's good in data analytics. Maybe you need somebody else who has substantive HR knowledge. So then again, you will look at the skill matrix. So I hope you are able to appreciate that this matrix will immediately throw up candidates for you to fill positions, and also to align if you have a project or particular initiative that being taken, etc., etc. So you have all the ready candidates in front of you, and this is only as an example that we are looking at for individuals. But if you have a filled skill matrix tool in front of you, then you can see a large part of the organization and their data, and that will immediately throw up all the names, and you don't really have to do too much scouting because all of that is right in front of you. So, any thoughts on how helpful this is likely to be?
Yeah, the adding of the interest level is definitely of use, because we've been doing it till the proficiency, but this really creates a new dimension. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. So definitely yes. If you add more dimensions, then it becomes easier, and obviously this has come from uh, a degree of mining that has happened. So Jonathan could just be asked that how proficient are you in, let's say, business acumen or analysis or advanced data analytics, and he will say that okay, this is my knowledge, beginner level, intermediate, proficient, anything. But then you have to dig deeper and ask him that are you really interested? I mean, suppose we plan your career in this direction, would you be keen? And that is where you have to dig a bit deeper and understand that would Jonathan be keen, and therefore you populate the skill matrix accordingly. And as you rightly said, Arpita, that gives the HR manager a good insight into who can take up which role, whose interest lies where, what kind of learning paths can be created for them, so that if you have interest and you have the proficiency is maybe one, then they can definitely be grown to three. So that's a very simplified version of what a skill matrix looks like. So let's look at some of the benefits. So a skill matrix helps to drive performance in multiple ways, and it's not only beneficial to the team but also to the individual organization and internal and external clients. So how it helps the team is that basically you get a team perspective into what are the skills that you have. Very often, what happens is that any team, if let's say I'm into workforce planning, then they just look at themselves as workforce planners. They don't kind of dig deeper and try and understand what are the other skills that team members may have. So if you do a skill matrix exercise for the team, what you will discover is there are many other relevant skills that they have. And if you want to plan their career path, or if you want to give them a job rotation, or you want to align them to special projects, so the skill matrix will immediately be of great help. Also, what happens is, let's say this team has been tasked with uh, a change management exercise. Now, if you have a ready skill matrix, you can know that, okay, who are the guys in this team who are proficient with interpersonal relationships, who are proficient in terms of communicating better with stakeholders. And that will immediately help you plan that exercise better because you have a good idea of the skill matrix of the team. So also it makes you aware of the weak spots and what extra care can be taken to address those weak spots. So in a way, it's a good input into a SWOT of the team, so to say. Any experience of using a skill matrix to evaluate a team?
No, we've
Anyone?
not used, not for teams.
Okay. So, Shweta, where have you used this?
We use it as a part of the appraisal exercise. Individually, we are mapping, but not as a whole team together.
So you look at an individual skill matrix.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Vikram, what about you? You've been very quiet today.
No, actually, this is what is my experience is that whenever some particular task was to be planned or some new activity was planned, new product launches planned, one was that product knowledge and basic was the selling skill. So we had this type of profiling that uh, which are the people who are good at product knowledge, who are also good at selling skill. So this type who is very good at product knowledge as well as selling skill, somebody who doesn't have a good product knowledge but very good at selling skill, this type of I have done, but not very deep.
Okay. Yes. You can actually, this is not written in stone that it has to be like this or like that, but basically the deeper you go into a skill matrix, the better it is, particularly when you're going for high value critical strategic projects. It's best if you have a good skill matrix in front of you so that it helps you plan your project better. Next is the individual level. So the skills matrix also helps the individual twofold. First, it gives the individual insight into their own competencies and what they bring to the table and what are missing. So this is a good start point to kind of develop this individual further. And secondly, it makes the individual aware of the skills that are required for the team. So where is the gap, and can they fill that gap? Can they do anything about it? So uh, so this basically communicates the expectations that may be there from an individual. So because if, let's say, I'm in HR, I'm been a HR business partner so far, and now I also need to understand it from a more strategic perspective. So let's say I need a little bit of understanding of data analytics. So I am currently a bit challenged. I'm not very kind of comfortable with uh, presenting data through Excel. So that is something maybe I need to do, and then use some business intelligence tools like Minitab or Access or something like that. So that will give me a far better handle on even the current role that I'm doing of a HR business partner. So therefore, it really throws up good insights for the individual. It can actually also be slightly discouraging. The first time I had done a skill matrix exercise, so I was working in IBM, and IBM has a very elaborate global skill matrix, and unfortunately, it is not taken very seriously by HR every time. Ideally, it should be a annual exercise and should be done rigorously, but it is kind of optional. So while the entire software is there, you have to go to the link. You have to fill in, the software in terms of what your skill level is, what is the level of proficiency in each of those skills. So you need to fill all of that up. So and that really gives a great insight. Of course, it also gave me a big inferiority complex because the skills listed against a manager's profile was, let's say, 26 skills, and out of the 26 skills you discover that you probably have only about 10 or 11 skills in which you are proficient, and rest of the 15 skills you are kind of at a very basic stage. So it kind of it's, in a way, it's a wake up call or something like that. But uh, you realize, oh my God, there are so many things that I need to be proficient in, and I am just at a very basic level in all of those. So, it's a good kind of a mirror, so to say, in terms of you as a professional. Next is organizations. So, on a very large scale, the organization gets an overview of available competencies and areas of improvement. And these are the areas that the organization can invest their learning and development budget into in order to function better. And in addition, these competency matrices also help to redistribute talent. So they in IBM, there is also something called global career market, global career marketplace. So there you can apply for a job, and wherever you are applying, so the person who has kind of advertised that job, so he or she will see the number of applications they've got, and if your skill matrix is updated, they will just go and click the candidate's skill matrix and see, okay, now this person has applied for a project manager role in Argentina, and this person has a proficiency level of 3 out of 4 in 60% of the skills, while another candidate who's applied maybe has 70% proficiency. So I will kind of, in terms of proficiency, at least I'm getting a good index into uh, who is a better candidate. So therefore, if you really have this filled up, and if this system is working in your organization, this can be very helpful. Next is clients. Generally, we do not share our skill matrix with the client, but there are different kinds of clients. You may have a client where you're working more as a client vendor relationship, but there are also clients who work more like partners and who have been working with you for years and years. So with such clients, it's you can share your skill matrix if required. I'm sorry, there is some siren gone off uh, outside my house. There's a busy street outside and a lot of traffic. Okay, so
So we really understand
yeah, I think somebody's allowed.
that that keep happening.
Yeah. So actually, my the street outside my house is so busy at times. When I take calls, people think, "Are you on the road?" I say, "No, I'm not on the road. I'm kind of sitting in my house, absolutely inside." But that's the way things are. So anyway, so coming back to, so you can share a skill matrix with a client if you don't have issues around confidentiality or client losing confidence looking at the skill matrix or something like that. But that really helps if you have a good partnership with your client, and they at times clients kind of help you as external parties, as external stakeholders, and they have great insights which actually help you strengthen your working and your offerings. So and they also bring in an outside in perspective which we may not have inside the organization. So those are some benefits that you can count on. So let's look at how do we build skill matrix. So first is you define the relevant skills for the project. So let's say you have a project. So you need to first identify, like for example, when we go out and we look for a profile. Very often I see that people say that, okay, I need a assistant manager in quality. I need a manager in HR or XYZ. So basic thing, of course, is that I tell them that, okay, can I see the job description? Because the manager who needs that profile, he or she will say that, okay, I want this person to be really hands on. Want this person to have a lot of experience. So all that is gossip. You need to show me a job description. There has to be a formal job description for every role. So similarly, if you have a set of skills identified for this particular role, which generally gets captured in a job description, but if you have a skill matrix, nothing like it. And if you have a ready-made skill matrix in your organization, that let's say this job entails X number of skills, uh, at least 10 of those skills should be at a expert level, maybe 3 at proficient, and another 7 at a beginner level. So then you understand that, okay, this is the kind of profile I'm looking at. And your chances of going wrong when you're looking for that profile with that level of detail are much lesser as compared to just having a sense of the profile and then going to scout for that talent in the market. So first of all, you need to identify what are the important skills required for this particular profile. Then you assess. Uh, so generally, what happens is in a skill matrix, it's always a self-assessment. The basic action that takes place is a self-assessment. So I will be asked to assess myself on X number of skills. And they could be 5 levels, which is the Likert scale, or it could be like over here, you have 4 levels, no capability, basic capability, intermediate level of capability, and then you have advanced capability. Or I had worked in creating a very basic skill matrix for a large number of profiles. There, it was just 3 simple levels. One was beginner. Sorry, one was competent, because we didn't want to kind of consider beginners at all. People had to be competent, even if they were external hires. So they had to come in at a competent level at least, and then they were expected to be proficient, and third was expert. So uh, and then you could look at your project and say that everybody doesn't have to be an expert. I would need 30% of the project team which is at an expertise level, another 30% which is at a proficient level, and maybe another 30% at a competent level. But that is something you can work out in terms of the project challenges, in terms of the criticality and the strategic nature of the project. But basically you do 180 degrees, which is first you evaluate yourself, and then you ask your manager to evaluate you. So now the second part, which is the critical part, where your manager evaluates you. So I may have a very exaggerated sense of my capabilities. I may think, wow, I'm like God's gift to HR, but your manager may not agree with you, and your manager may give a rating which is more moderate, and bring down your overall scores. So the skill matrix will throw up a rating which is going to be an average of the rating that you give yourself and that your manager gives. So and they can also be a peer evaluation. So uh, so important thing to take away from here is that first you do a self assessment, then a manager evaluates you on all of those, and on those four levels of proficiency. Now next you can also have a 360-degree, which is your manager evaluates you, your peers evaluate you, and your team members also evaluate you. Okay, so I may say that people management is my forte. I'm very good. Now, your team may feel that you are not as proficient as you love to imagine yourself. So you can have also a 360-degree, which is of course the best thing to do, where your team also evaluates you. But uh, I have never come across a skill matrix so far where there is a team evaluation also. Yes, I think I did come across, but it was not really used because there is a non-skill matrix implication of that, because that organization cultural needs to be very mature if it will allow reportees to evaluate their managers, and that level of maturity typically is not there in most organizations. So therefore, even if you are using a software which has a feature that the teams will evaluate the manager, but generally it doesn't get used, doesn't get activated, and lies dormant. So it's basically the individual, their manager, and at the most maybe their peers, and sometimes their clients who may evaluate them on their skill matrix. So this is the most critical part, where you evaluate yourself and you are evaluated by the other stakeholders. Next is you determine a person's interest in working on those tasks that have been proposed. So as we saw earlier, it's best if it is kept at a binary, which is basically interested, not interested. Remember, whenever you keep something binary, it becomes more actionable, and it is easier to decipher when you are reporting that out. But if you keep it on a scale, then it becomes more difficult to decipher, and typically it is less actionable. So you already have a 4 or 5 scale proficiency level. So interest level is best if you just keep it at a binary, which is yes, no, and then you incorporate all of these and you act on the insights, because it will throw up a huge amount of data, and are you willing to handle this level of data. So typically that's how you arrive at a skill matrix. So any questions so far on this? This is a fairly simple tool. The challenge really is how do you work this, because an entire organization has to kind of push it and make it happen. Otherwise, if just individuals want it to happen, typically it doesn't.
So I would like to share one example which was done in Pfizer.
Sure.
We have the hierarchy is very less, means the regional business managers who control one or two states or regions we call, and
Mhm.
above that we have a sales manager in who sits in Mumbai, and then there is a director. So the hierarchy is very less. So these regional managers, they had their metrics, skill metrics as per the appraisal data which was done by their bosses. But once they had a workshop, and before that workshop, they had to go through this 360-degree feedback where the immediate reportees, that is the first line managers, they rated these RBMs, and
Okay.
their ratings were discussed there in the meeting. That see, this is what you think that you are, and this
Mhm.
is what your team thinks that you are. And then
Okay.
the session was conducted, leadership development session was conducted, and that turned out to be very useful and rather an eye opener for most of the regional managers, where they thought that we are so good and we are great and all. And ultimately, it came out that, see, you think you are great, but see, these are the things your team or your immediate team thinks about you. So that was really very appreciated,
Yeah.
the development of the RBMs.
Right. That's a great example. So typically, when you like you have this Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you dig into this, basically what you discover is that there is a huge cognitive bias that people have, and they tend to think themselves far better than they actually are. And this applied also in a very detailed survey that took place on customer service, where the service provider felt that we deliver great customer service, while the customers rated them very poorly, saying that this customer service is not good at all. There was actually a difference of about 13% in terms of the self-evaluation and the third-party evaluation. So yes, it comes as an eye opener. And when you're doing a good leadership program, one of the basics, very simple ingredient that should go into a leadership program is basically a honest self-evaluation. And if they're not able to do that, maybe a third perspective which throws light on what those individuals can really improve on, which unfortunately the people involved in the program are not able to bring up, because we are not able to introspect to that level. But when you have other people who are working with them, bringing their insights, then that really adds a lot of value. So great, Vikram. That's a great example. So Pallavi, Arpita, any questions so far or any observations?
So I was just thinking aloud that while for developing the skill matrix, can these organizations, because practically I've never done that,
Mhm.
can they use these tools such as MBTI or FIROB, so that these employees, they fill their own assessment, do their self assessment, which are scientifically proven also, and on that basis we can develop their personality type, which clearly talks about their traits, and then accordingly we can identify that which kind of training these people are best suitable for, keeping in mind their future roles and aligning the competencies which are actually required in them. So is that practically working, or some organizations which are using like this, or maybe a team role kind of a thing, Belburn team role, where they try to analyze their competencies?
No, for the entire organization, it might be challenging both from the time and the
Uh-huh.
cost perspective. But for something
Huh.
like an IDP or like the Pankaj was saying, a leadership program, it
Hmm.
definitely both the perspectives I feel is doable. But if it's a
Okay.
larger mass scale, I feel
Uh-huh.
it could be challenging doing both of
Hmm.
these.
Definitely, yeah, because these are a costly tools. But nowadays,
Yeah.
what is happening? These tools are available online also,
Mm.
so we can always, ask especially because as the skill matrix says that as per the competencies which are required, we need to identify the skill set, and accordingly we need to map the people. So, don't we think so that that would be more realistic and authentic tool?
Yeah, so see, Pallavi, there are two things about this.
Mm-hmm.
One is that we call it a skill matrix uh, largely because it is supposed to be exactly that basic set of skills. Now, when you go into one of those developmental tools or a psychometric tool, what happens is that you get into an area of subjectivity.
Okay.
So let's say somebody is a MBTI INFP, or uh,
Okay.
maybe according
Hmm.
to this, somebody is
ESTJ, huh? Correct.
yeah, D and C, or something like that. So
Hmm.
uh, now those are behavioral aspects. attributes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
behavior also plays an important role, but behavior is kind of good to understand, good to know, and then work upon. But here, our focus area is basically on uh, a
The
skill. Let's say, yeah,
technical skill.
yeah. So it's more of a basic skill. For example, am I able to do costing well or not?
Mm. Mm.
Am I able to handle a team well or not? Or am I able to manage my time and my team's productivity well or not? So
Okay.
MBTI will give me more insights, but may not be very actionable. Okay.
Okay. Mm.
So skill matrix ideally is kept separate, but like Arpita said, you can use it in conjunction with one or two tools, but it one has to be kind of sensitive and also be trained on those lines to be able to handle it well. For
Mm.
example,
Correct.
you said EST. Now, ESTJ will talk about extroversion, sensing,
Yeah.
thinking, judging.
Judging. Yeah.
So, now how will this play out? All of these attributes, how will this play out? His decision making may be like this. His energy impulse may be extroverted or introverted. His, he may be more a thinking person or a intuiting person. Sensing or so. Uh, how will it play out? So that
So, but
becomes.
sir, indirectly, what I understand, be it any profile, people have to have some or other these qualities. I mean, they are specific. So, for example, if somebody is into production,
Right.
right, and he has to take a lot of decisions, and he is a project manager, so the decision making ability should be really well. He has to be. We don't believe that these project managers they have to be necessarily be extrovert, but they cannot be the introvert. So we have to see that how much balancing scores do they have, so that we can give them the right interventions. I mean, I'm just thinking because I am a MBTI practitioner, so maybe I'm trying to connect the dots there.
Mhm.
uh, could be
Yeah, it's a good thought. I think we should always think out of the box, and it's a good thought.
Yeah, because of a person who is more of an intuitive, right, he is
Mhm.
bound to be more creative. People those who are more creative, they think out of the box, and then of course they are more inclined towards the innovative things. So when it comes to strategy making, and if we found that these people are more, I mean, in a department this person has a high degree of innovativeness in him, of course these people can be further promoted for strategy making kind of a skills, and then right kind of a technical tools can be helpful for them to develop, and then further they can grow up in the hierarchy.
But for
No.
behavioral things, can we, promotion is a thing which is more related to actual performance. Can we
Okay.
bifurcate in terms of their behavior or personality?
Hmm.
It would
So
go,
more
yeah,
matrices, clear cut, calculated,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
matrices should be there.
yeah.
ठीक है.
It
So
becomes easier.
also, like you are a MBTI practitioner, and so suppose somebody is, let's say, he has a sensing style, as compared to, let's say, intuiting style. So his decision making style is, let's say, sensing. Now, uh, how do you know that he's a good decision maker or not? That is his style. MBTI is telling you that this is the way this person likes to decide. Or let's say
Correct.
he's extroverted or introverted. But
Hmm.
how do I know? Let's say, yeah, I mean, logically, you would say that a salesperson needs to be extroverted and not introverted. But
Hmm.
uh, so that is just a indicator, but actually we will come across a lot of salespeople who are introverted people, but who are
But
very,
they do massive.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they do
Correct.
very well in terms of
Hmm.
interacting, particularly when it's one-to-one interaction. They may not
Hmm.
be very good in one-to-many interaction. So
Hmm.
therefore, it's a bit tricky when you bring in that additional dimension. But
Hmm.
in a smaller context, maybe in one particular trading session, etc., there you can kind of bring that in, and you can mix and match if you want to do that. But a
All
skill
right.
matrix, remember,
All right.
is like a good tool for talent management. It's something that kind of uh, let's say the organization needs X number of people with X skills. So the skill
Hmm.
matrix will immediately throw that up. But if I
Hmm.
bring in subjectivities like MBTI or DISC or Pyrobi, then it will be far more complicated. And also, you would be aware that some of these tools don't allow people to be selected, rejected
Yes,
on the
yes,
basis of
not. Correct,
so
correct.
therefore, yeah, so therefore that dimension also has to be kept in mind. So therefore, it's best if we just restrict ourselves to a set of skills. But yeah, for a developmental intervention, we can bring in that other piece also.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
Okay, so I think let's look at a video which kind of encapsulates a skill matrix in an interesting way.
Welcome to the project Dynamic SME. In this presentation, Paula Dinamica will illustrate the knowledge management tool Competence Matrix to the entrepreneur Victor. Hey Paula, how are you?
Hi Victor, good and you?
More or less. Well, I'm seeing problems regarding the lack of training in some of my employees. On the level they are operating, my employees are supposed to have certain skills in order to do their activities efficiently. However, I have come to know that some are lacking of these skills. What can you offer or recommend me to do?
Have you heard of the competence matrix?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Well, I have already applied it in my enterprise. This tool allows me to structure, evaluate and visualize the skills and competencies that are with my employees. That way, I have a good overview who can and who can't do something. I think the application of this tool would be great help for you to solve your problem, Victor.
And Paula, why have you decided to use this knowledge management tool? How can it help me with my problems?
Well, I decided to apply this tool because I was in the situation once that an important employee who had the task to run and maintain the enterprise homepage had to leave for several months. A little later, the homepage stopped working, creating high costs and a large threat to my sales. The competence matrix allowed me to become aware who are my important employees, experts in performing certain tasks, and gave me an overview which of my employees would be hired to substitute once having left the company. The implementation of such a plan, Victor, will bring you many advantages.
Really? Well, tell me which ones.
You will be able to realize the following. The competence matrix will show you the skills and competences that are missing in your company, or the skills that are not very well distributed currently. It will furthermore allow you to evaluate and determine the needs of training among your employees. If you are able to increase the distribution of skills among your employees, your enterprise will become more flexible. And if you're looking for new personnel, the competence matrix will help you to define a profile of skills for new potential employees.
Very interesting, Paula. But how can I build such a competence matrix?
It is actually really easy. It only requires a few steps. Identify the competencies among your employees and put these competencies into a matrix.
Well, can you explain the competence matrix a little more in detail for me, Paula?
Of course, Victor. In the first step, try to identify the competencies that your employees apply on a daily basis. I choose to do so through brainstorming on a blackboard. Then you can group certain competencies into categories, such as, for example, manufacturing process technology, language, design, and social skills. Then put the names of your employees into the rows and competencies into the columns. In the following step, Victor, each employee will then evaluate his capacity to which he can fulfill certain competencies. My employees are classifying themselves by putting 3 pluses if they have a very good capacity in performing these tasks, 2 pluses if they can perform a task independently, and 1 plus if they are still learning how to apply this task. Later, you can evaluate the matrix together with the employees and make corrections if needed. Once this step is finished, looking vertically, you will be able to analyze the capacities of all employees to perform a certain task. Looking horizontally, you will have a performance profile of your employees.
Wow, this tool is indeed quite easy to use. Well, since you have been applying this tool in your enterprise for quite some time now, what are key aspects to keep in mind? What do you think is important to keep in mind when implementing a competence matrix?
One key element is that you should avoid gaps in knowledge. That is, in any discipline, prevent the situation that you have just one person with the highest score, meaning 3 pluses. Because if this person then leaves your company, then this may substantially reduce the performance of your company. You should furthermore set minimum standards for each discipline. In my company, which is medium in size, I have come to the conclusion that at least 2 employees should have the highest score for each category.
Thank you very much for your help, Paula.
You're welcome, Victor. And if you need more information, I have some interesting links here for you. Or you may also access the information on the homepage of Dynamic SME, which also helped me to implement the knowledge management tool.
Okay, so I hope you found that useful.
Yes, sir. It was very clear.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
absolutely clear.
Yeah, it was a nice kind of a different way of talking about a tool. So it was nice. And it is also very useful in terms of manpower planning, and like this lady rightly said, uh, it becomes very tricky in small organizations. If you are completely dependent on 2 or 3 people, then it becomes very tricky. So it's important to distribute your skills across the people in the company, because if you have too many skills concentrated on too few people, then there is a big risk in terms of those people leaving and leaving the organization high and dry. So any other questions, any thoughts on skill matrix before we move to succession planning? Okay, if not, then yeah, Vikram, you said something?
No, no.
It's clear, yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's move to succession planning. So succession planning is again a very, very critical tool in talent management. And so this is though it's a very critical tool, generally it is done only for senior positions on and some critical positions. It is not really done across the organization. So here is some data that only about a minority of the organizations, which is about less than 50%, maybe 48%, are ready with some succession planning for the leaders. So you can see the number of qualifications only for leaders, and that also less than 50%. So therefore, you can well imagine that what would be the level of preparedness for the middle and lower profiles? Practically nil in most organizations. So that is the state in terms of succession planning. So what are your thoughts on succession planning? If before we get in deeper into it, if you can share a sense of what your thoughts are on succession planning.
So for us also, it's usually in every 6 months we review the critical roles, like you're mentioning, for an emergency and a long-term successor who would be ready in the next 2 years. So that review does take place seriously, and it's also connected with special development programs for people who are identified. But yes, it doesn't happen for all the roles. That's a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
But we try to at least have a backup to critical roles at all times. it becomes really difficult because we are around 500 group only, and if somebody at that level leaves, it would really be we would be in a lurch. So we try to create backups at all times to these roles.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That you are planning and thinking of critical positions. You're thinking of how to back them up. Uh, were they to leave, or were they to, maybe be unwell, especially these days.
Now,
Anybody?
yeah, it has really helped out because quite a few of our branches only unfortunately got ill this last 6 months. So it really helped out to somebody to take over.
Yeah. So, and I think, in given the uncertainty in today's times, it's all the more reason that people should be doing succession planning. So that is where the status is, and this is, of course, the international scenario. My sense is that in India it would be much lesser, and that also maybe for the C-level executives there may be some backups, but generally you don't really have too many backups. What I've seen is in some organizations in India that people ensure that if somebody is also identified as their successor, they ensure that the poor person who's identified as a successor doesn't do too well, and then his chances of being a successor gets diluted in a year or two. So I don't know if you had that experience, but I've kind of seen that, because the current incumbent feels insecure when a successor is identified. So that's probably to do more with politics and prevailing culture in the organization.
That's true, because now with a certain degree of maturity, I mean, our teams at least are realizing life gets so much easier if you have somebody well trained and who can take up your role, and then you can move forward to a new role uh, onwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the kind of a more mature way of looking at things. But very often people feel that, like Jack Welch had said, that you should work towards making yourself redundant. Now, initially, I used to take that at face value, that I should work to make myself redundant. But gradually, when I moved to other organizations, where if you work towards making yourself redundant, you actually become redundant. You don't get another role, but you are just moved out. So people stop
Mm.
to make themselves redundant. They So that is not a mature view of things, but you are right. The mature view of things is that people should actually create their backup, have a succession plan, so that they uh, they are able to free up bandwidth, and they are able to then focus on larger things. But then it is not just about the individual or about the successor, but it is also about the organizational culture, the organizational systems in place, which will ensure movement of one person to another role while the successor steps in. So it is a end-to-end exercise and cannot really be done in isolation. Okay, so moving on, why is it important? It's very critical because it's a process of identifying and developing, of transitioning potential successors for the company's present and future roles, aligned with talent and ambition of its current employees and talent network. So there are different levels of maturity in terms of how mature an organization is in terms of succession planning. So the basic, of course, is that there is no succession plan at all. There is no succession process, and if somebody leaves, or somebody retires, or somebody passes away, then you just don't have anybody. So you may arbitrarily pick up someone and put them in that role given the person's experience, or may hire from outside. Next is you have some sort of replacement planning. Approximately 15% of the organizations function at this level. So broadly, there is a hierarchy, and you feel that, okay, if let's say a manager moves out, then I have six deputy managers. I will promote the best among the deputy managers to take over as a manager. So that is a approximate planning that is there, and it is basis more of hierarchy, and rather than a conscious process. Then you have the majority where you have a traditional succession planning. 52% of organizations operate at this level, where you just look at some select strategic roles and you say that, okay, I want to have their successors identified and readied across a certain time frame. Could be 1 year, could be 2 years, could be 3 years. That really depends on how stable the organization is and how far-sighted the organization is. Another variable nowadays is that organizations don't tend to be as stable as they used to be earlier. Even at large companies like Google or Apple or let's say some of these oil companies, even they are constantly moving into new products, into new countries. So there is a lot of fluidity in even the large companies. So succession planning, where you want to groom somebody for across 2 or 3 years, that requires a degree of stability. But that stability comes only when you have revenues coming in from a set of products and a set of services in a set of countries. But when all of that is always changing, it becomes a bit difficult to groom somebody over a time frame of 2 to 3 years. But anyway, I mean that is something that you have to grapple with, given the dynamic nature of today's market and today's corporate environment. And last piece is where, sorry, there you have integrated succession management, where 12% of the companies have achieved this level of maturity, where you have a fairly good end-to-end succession management taking place. And moment somebody leaves or retires, then you have the planning kicking in and the identified person stepping in. So, for example, yeah, there was, some of these large companies you may probably notice and read about the succession planning. In ITC, you had a person called Chug who moved out, and Deveshwar Yogi took over. And Yogi was, he actually took over in a hostile kind of environment. He was the best after Chug, but he shared a lot of company secrets with the investigation officers, which resulted in Chug kind of being nailed for some malpractices. Then uh, uh, Deveshwar Yogi took over, and he was very dynamic, and but his transition was very smooth, and he had already identified the successor, who's the current incumbent, and he has been doing quite well. So obviously, the successor who was identified quite well. He had all the required maturity and experience to handle the role, and now he is handling that role very well. He is taking the company to new levels of growth. So that is what is good succession planning. Similarly, in some companies you see a good transition happening. So at least during when Jack Welch moved out, Jeff Immelt took over, and it was a very smooth transition. And Jeff Immelt was the global CEO of GE for about 15 years. And then, unfortunately, the transition has not been smooth, and GE is going down in terms of revenue. And the person who was selected as the CEO, they had to let go of him within 1 year. So obviously, the succession planning had not really worked very well. And then the new incumbent is there, and what he's busy doing is controlling costs, not really growing the revenue, but controlling costs and trying to stem the losses. So that is a totally different strategy. But anyway, the succession planning, unfortunately, has not been very smooth, but in some companies it's very smooth. For example, look at Apple. When Steve Jobs was dying, people said that, okay, Apple is Steve Jobs, and without Steve Jobs, Apple will disintegrate or will not grow. Whereas with this new person, Tim Cook, he's doing it very well, and the company has been growing from strength to strength. It is able to launch iPhones at a fairly high frequency, and their revenue has, I think, they are the first company to touch a 3 trillion market capitalization, which is no company ever in the history of mankind has ever touched a 3 trillion market capitalization. So that shows that great succession planning can make a huge difference to how the company fares after one individual moves on. and another takes over. Okay, so here are some statistics. So you have, internal management, insufficient internal management bench strength to meet our business needs. So you have uh, best in class who are about 59%, average 63%, and laggards, which is the biggest, who have insufficient management bench at 73. So most company are laggards and they don't have good bench strength. So bench strength also really makes sure that you have people for those particular skills, those particular experiences in the right markets, in the right products, in the right segments. So this is very varied, because again, as things are very dynamic, you may not have too many people. Like, I don't think there is any company which has adequate talent in AI, machine learning, IoT. These are all new things which are coming up in the market, and chances are that if you have somebody who's looking after data analytics, he or she may not really have a backup, because these are all new skills that are coming up. So even apart from new skills, the marketplace is very dynamic, and so it is not easy to replace a large number of profiles. Then the cost of replacing key employees from outside the organization. So at least their best in class is about 63% of those surveyed, they are able to replace employees, and at a fairly nominal rate, nominal cost, while 46 are kind of average. They do not incur a very high cost, but are not cheap either, or economical either. And then you have 23% who may be replacing key employees from outside at exorbitant costs. We know that lateral hires are always more expensive than growing talent from inside. So there are companies who don't really care for growing talent inside the company, and they feel that they can acquire any talent from outside. So so they just go out and buy from the market rather than grow talent internally. And next is turnover of high potential. So these are people that you have to really guard against. That high potentials or high pots in your company should not be wanting to leave the company. If they leave the company, then you are at a big risk, and also you are likely to incur higher expenses and, even worse, business discontinuity. So, and unfortunately, 39%, which is much bigger than the best in class and average, who are not able to hold on to their high potentials. You will see that in many organizations, HR is worried about only one attrition. That attrition is the attrition of the high potential. They are not really interested if people who are from the bottom performers or the mid performers leave the organization. But where HR really gets it from the business is when the high performers leave the organization. So that is a set of people that everybody, every business wants to retain. And whenever you incur a loss over there, that is where you are getting hit quite badly. So I don't know about your experience, but largely I've seen that HR is focused on retaining the high potential talent, not as much the mid and the low potential.
Yes, sir, because the low potential and mid, they generally don't leave. So it is only the high potential who leave.
Yeah, you're right. Uh, or they leave at a very kind of, the frequency is very low. Uh, while the high potential tends to leave quickly, they get more offers. And I have actually also come across organizations where they deliberately, do not hire the best talent from the market. They hire the next best talent, where they feel that these profiles are more economical, because they are not at the highest compensation ratio, and they are at the second level of compensation ratio. And second is the bigger advantage which comes from the tier two players is that they tend to be more stable. The high flyers are very unstable. They keep getting offers, they keep taking offers, keep moving out, while the tier two people tend to be people who are generally known as the solid performers, They may not be extremely high in potential, but in terms of performance, they are quite solid. So I've seen organizations also gunning for those profiles and ignoring the best profiles. I, okay, maybe I don't want to name the organization, but one large knowledge company in India, they always focus on the tier two level candidates and not the best candidates. And that is a proven strategy, and that has really yielded them good dividends because their attrition rates are low and they are able to hold on to the solid performance. Anyway, so moving on. So, what role does succession planning play in talent management? So, first of all, is talent assessment. What kind of talent does the organization need? So this is a key question that any talent manager should be asking: that what sort of a talent should we retain, and what do we have currently? So, therefore, that is a big exercise that every organization should do in terms of what is it that we need and what is it that we have. And if the gap between the two is substantial, then you have a serious problem. So now, I was consulting for an organization which has now recently got a big contract from Delhi Metro, which is Central Electronics Limited. And they are a excellent organization in terms of the talent that used to have the talent they have, but it was meant for, because electronics is a very it's a field that is changing rapidly. So they have good capability in terms of the earlier set of products, and they need to revamp quickly, and they are trying to do that. But they did a very good exercise in terms of evaluating uh, where uh, where are they going, what is the talent they need to go there, and currently what is the talent they have vis-a-vis where they are planning to go. And they discovered that there is a significant gap. Now, what do you do with this gap? Do you retrain this gap? Do you get rid of them and get new players? How do you do that? Now, obviously, we know that you cannot get rid of your entire company and saying that they don't have the right skills, so we need the right skills, because they at least have the basic skills in place which you can groom. So then you have to make a decision in terms of what percentage can be trained and what percentage has to be let go of so that you can get fresh talent. So that is a very elaborate exercise, this organization did. And then you look at typically some of the high impact positions. Obviously, the MD is a very high impact position. Obviously, the head of engineering is a high impact position. The person who's the head of business development is very high impact. So similarly, what are the high impact positions? Some of the key engineers in the organization who are very good experts in their area, they are able to move from one product to another product easily. So you need to look at what are those high impact positions. Then, what are the talent aspirations? Like, remember when we started, we talked about when we were talking about the skill matrix, we talked about potential. So here you also look at aspiration. So who are our top leaders? What are their career aspirations? What do you need to do to retain them? And do we have successors in the pipeline? So here you look at, what are the aspirations? Are people interested in the roles that we are creating for them? If they are not interested, then there is not much point doing this entire exercise. But only if they are interested, then we can plan their careers and we can align them for to be successors of key positions. So therefore, the aspiration has to be factored in. Next is the talent selection. So how would you know that these are the right people for that particular talent, for that particular position? Do they have the right talent? So therefore, you need to align the business objectives, the right talent. Let's say I want to grow my business, 2x, and therefore I need a very good business development team who will front end and penetrate my existing clients, better. At the same time, go for new clients and work out the mix between more revenue from existing clients and also more new clients generating new revenue. So I need a good business development team. I need a good uh, strategy team which will help them back them up with the go-to-market strategy. I will need a team. Suppose they get business now, who will back them up in terms of delivery, operations? So I need a team which is aligned to my business objective of getting more business through a better business development team by strengthening the back end as well. And then you look at how much of it do I have internally and how much do I need to source externally. And then you look at uh, you know where are the opportunities currently in this new strategy, and then what do you need externally, and internally, if you need to grow people, what trainings would you need. So therefore there is a very intricate relationship between succession planning and talent management, and they go really hand in hand. So and you can see over here, it is also creating a big impact on learning and development. Is that fairly clear in this?
Yeah, it's very clear.
Yes, sir.
Great. So moving on, these are, we've already discussed some of these, so, but basically it follows a process, and companies which are process driven, they have a BPMS for succession planning. So they first of all identify what are the key positions, and then they identify the key talent that exists in the organization, then the assessment of the talent. So I may do a 360-degree and I still may not be able to uh, confidently say that yes, this is the absolutely right talent unless you assess them. And then you assess and find out maybe there is a gap, maybe there isn't. If there is a gap, then you groom and develop further, and then you support the transition so that while you're grooming them, they are getting ready to take over the key positions, but with on the job experience, with job rotation, with more exposure to maybe additional projects, some job rotation, etc. So you support the transition, and then eventually they take up those positions. So how do you identify what are the key positions? So there are two factors. One is the criticality. So the impact of the position has on strategic imperatives of the organization. If, let's say, this position moves out, what will be the impact on business results? What will be the impact on external and internal customers? What are the characteristics of the position in terms of time to fill, skills required, adaptability towards changing circumstances? So all of this defines how I will look at any particular skill as a critical, sorry, as a any position as a key position. So we will evaluate the business impact, the impact on stakeholders, internal, external, and also the time to fill this position. If it takes a long time to fill this position, then it's all the more reason that I should have a successor identified early on, who can be groomed and who can be nurtured to make the transition. So all these three reasons are very critical in terms of deciding which are the roles for which successors need to be identified, need to be groomed, and need to be readied for a transition. Next is retention. So the how likely is this position that the organization will be able to retain this employee. Now, let's say the retention is, not the chances are low. Then it's all the more reason that you should have your succession planning in place. For example, in certain market situations, in 2005, 2006, 2007, there was a huge boom of job opportunities, and everybody was sitting with maybe three or four opportunities in their pockets. So I was a senior manager, and I had three good offers from three different companies, all well-known companies, and that was not just for me. There were many other people who had similar offers, because you had MNCs coming into India. They were desperately looking for talent. There was a big gap between what they needed and the talent that was available. So all those people who kind of fitted into their scheme of things, all of them had a good set of offers coming their way. So I remember the HOD had come and met me, and she kind of identified me as an important position because I was looking at global induction programs and global senior induction programs, manager to VP. There was a special induction for them. So I had designed the entire program. I ran the program globally, and therefore I was identified as a important profile, and therefore she focused on uh, asking me to develop another person in the team who would be able to, should I leave, that person would be able to uh, take over that role comfortably. But I left, I think, much sooner than the person got groomed. As a result, they had to hire somebody from outside. So the retention or retainability of the person is an important ingredient in identifying the key positions. I hope this is making sense.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes, yes.
moving on, we will come back to the famous nine blocker that we have been looking at earlier as well, only because it's a very useful tool. And here we have discussed earlier as well that you look at every person on two axes. One is performance and the other is potential. So typically, all evaluations tend to happen on performance and not as much on potential. But when you do a nine blocker, it's good to have evaluate people on potential as well. So if you evaluate people on potential, if you look at the x-axis and the y-axis, all those who are falling on low, whether they are low on potential or low on performance, those profiles have been taken off. And anybody who's falling on medium or high for performance and potential, so they may be very good performer, but potential is medium. Yet you should be ready to give them, you should identify them as key talent, and you should ready them for uh, another position, which is probably taking over from somebody who is holding a critical position, or just taking over from somebody as a successor for somebody. So therefore, you can see that anybody who's of course, if the inverted L, as it is called, the inverted L is basically here where you have high potential, high performance. This is your most critical talent in the organization, the high potential and the high performance. But then you cannot survive only on these people. No organization can survive only on these people. So, like we discussed earlier, that this profile also tends to be slightly fleet-footed. They move fast, and their retention is a challenge for HR. So therefore, you have to groom people high potential, mid performance, mid potential, mid performance, and mid potential but high performance. So you have to groom these other three boxes also for future roles and for future succession. So therefore, this is the pillar of the organization, but you cannot just rely on this. Your succession planning has to groom all these four boxes. Okay. And I don't know if you have used the nine blocker as a tool for succession planning, but as you can see over here, it should be used for succession planning. And this is something which should be feeding into your appraisal discussions also. Maybe it doesn't happen too often, but appraisal discussions need to be rich discussions discussing people's potential, people's growth path, and also how it is getting aligned to the organization's growth path. So the nine blocker can be used, and particularly these four boxes should be focused on for succession planning. So Arpita, as you discussed earlier, you use this tool. So do we
Yeah.
use it for succession planning also?
Yeah. It's used for succession planning. It's tied up with the appraisal process itself, and like right now, the appraisal is about to begin. And once it's over, we identify these cases, and then they get nominated for the ITP programs. So that's how we have tied it together.
Okay, very good.
So I have one question, doubt actually.
Yeah, sure.
In addition to this four were talking about, one is this high potential, low performance. Maybe if there is high potential but low performance can be due to some external factor or some attitude problem or something which has gone wrong. So
Mhm.
if this is also addressed, they can also become high potential they already have, so their performance can improve. And also this low potential high performance, these people are performing in spite of their low potential. So if they are put into some type of a training program or developmental program and increase their potential slightly, then maybe won't it help?
You are absolutely right, and I think well spoken as a good strategic HR manager that we have two additional boxes we can leverage, which is the high potential low performance and the low potential high performance. So you're absolutely right. And if I am the HR manager, typically I may look at these two boxes also, particularly if there is a paucity of talent. But if I am adequately staffed in terms of good talent and I don't really need to look further, then maybe I will ignore this. So traditionally, people just focus on the four boxes. But you are absolutely right. These two other boxes which you mentioned, they can also be groomed. And if they, or maybe at least they should be given a second chance. And if they come up the curve, then definitely we should, add them to the four boxes that we have highlighted.
Okay,
But
thank you.
very,
I
very
got
good.
the
Yeah.
point. If I have adequate talent, there's no need. But if I have
Yeah,
paucity of talent, it can be looked into. Thank you.
exactly. Exactly. Sure.
Thank you.
And you can also treat it as your plan B or your reserves, so maybe sometimes what happens is suddenly you get a very large project or you get a big assignment and you have to desperately start looking all over for good talent who can take over and get aligned to their project. So maybe those are the two boxes you can keep in reserve and look into them uh, as and when there is a need.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so moving on, so these are some commonly used methods for assessment. So how would you look at you know succession planning? So they percentage of companies they look at through the performance process. That is the most common thing to do. Like Arpita mentioned, that during the appraisal discussions itself, all of this gets tied in. So if your appraisal discussions are happening the way they should happen, then there is a lot of wealth of information that comes out, and you are able to understand that how who are the key talent, how do we align their growth paths, how do we see them succeeding into key roles that have been identified, and also the key positions which need to have backups. All of that gets discussed in the team-based decision making and the discussions that take place around appraisal ratings. So then you have line manager nomination. This is again another important way of succession planning. Then people have assessment centers. I think Pallavi mentioned some of that, that we can actually have assessing people on various tools. So assessment centers typically assess people on some psychometric profile. They assess people on various exercises, group discussions, one-to-one interviews, presentations. So all of that happens in an assessment center, and it generally gives a good insight into each profile. So typically, an assessment center should not have more than 12 to 15 people at one time. And when you assess these people in depth, you get a very interesting insight into their strengths and their areas of improvement. Then,
In fact, the line manager biases are also removed because they
exactly,
like their
exactly.
team and they want to
Mhm.
nominate, but assessment center really makes it uniform.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you have, neutral parties who are doing the assessment,
Yeah.
and people who are calibrated in terms of understanding and gauging the skills of the participant. So you are absolutely right. Sometimes most line managers tend to promote their people, and there are also the other way around when some line managers really run down their people. So both biases are able, we are able to get rid of both the biases.
Right.
Then you have self-selection. How you nominate yourself, how you like in the skill matrix we saw that the first entry point in a skill matrix is self-evaluation. So here as well in succession planning, you may see that there are these X number of positions. So which one would you be comfortable tracking in your career development, and you kind of do that. And then financial measures such as targets, sales, this is how I need to grow my revenue. So I need X number of people, or these are the targets I have. I cannot achieve these targets with my current headcount. So I need to, enhance the headcount, and therefore I need additional positions, and so and so forth. So succession planning kind of results in people using various forms and methods to identify the roles and then plan the succession of those roles. So we will now get into 2 or 3 examples of various companies. So I think what we'll do is we'll park it for our next session. We'll just cover these companies and then discuss 1 or 2 question papers in terms of how to answer various questions. So that's what we have for our last session, which is going to be next week. And if you have any specific questions in terms of what we have covered so far, please feel free, and then we can kind of go over that. And any other questions or doubts or anything else that you may want to share.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Anything else from today's session?
It's very useful, and if we actually start implementing it, a lot of insights come out from this exercise.
Yeah, and
Especially the scale matrix, I like the second one, the interest part of it. I'll try
Mhm.
to incorporate it this time.
Yeah, and you are in HR, so you can do that, and you can really others will also find it helpful.
Yeah.
Great. So look forward to catching up next week. You have
Yes, sir.
a good week ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for
Thanks.
for today's session. Yeah.
Thank you,
Sure.
so
My
much.
pleasure. Thank you.